The distant whistle of the train echoed across the plains as Nora Mitchell clutched her small carpetbag, heart hammering against her ribs. Through the dust-streaked window, the vast Arizona landscape stretched endlessly, a sea of ochre and gold beneath the merciless August sun of 1882. Each clack of the wheels brought her closer to a future. She'd gambled everything on a husband she'd never met. In a town called Quartzsite, she'd only read about in letters penned in a steady, confident hand. Last stop before Quartzsite. The conductor called, startling Nora from her reverie. 20 minutes. Nora smoothed the wrinkles from her best dress faded blue calico that had once belonged to her mother and checked her reflection in a small hand mirror. Her auburn hair was still neatly pinned, though tendrils had escaped during the 3-day journey from Pennsylvania. Dark circles shadowed her deep green eyes, evidence of sleepless nights spent wondering if she'd made the right choice. At 22, she'd become the subject of pitying glances in her hometown after her father's death left her alone and nearly destitute. When her childhood friend showed her an advertisement seeking women of good character for matrimony in the Arizona Territory, Nora had written immediately. After exchanging letters for 2 months with Vincent Yates, a cattle rancher who described himself as hardworking, God-fearing, and in need of a wife, she'd accepted his proposal. "What will you do if you don't like him?" asked the elderly woman who'd shared Nora's bench for the past 100 miles. Nora tucked the mirror away. "I'll make myself like him," she answered with more conviction than she felt. 2 hours later, the train screeched to a halt in Quartzsite. Nora descended the steps carefully, dust immediately coating her shoes and the hem of her dress. The platform was crowded with cowboys, miners, and townspeople, but no one stepped forward to claim her. "Excuse me," she asked the station master, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose. "Could you direct me to the property of Vincent Yates?" The man's expression shifted to one of confusion. "Vincent Yates, you say?" "Yes, sir. We're to be married." The station master exchanged glances with a deputy standing nearby. "Miss, I don't recall any Vincent Yates in these parts." A cold weight settled in Nora's stomach. "That can't be right. I have his letters." She fumbled in her bag, producing several pages of correspondence. "He wrote that he has a cattle ranch 3 miles west of town." The deputy, a young man with kind eyes, took the letters and read them quickly. "Madam, I know every property around here. There's no ranch at this location, just an empty lot that was abandoned after the drought 2 years back." Nora felt the blood drain from her face. There must be some mistake. "I'm afraid not, miss. Seems you've been deceived." The realization crashed over her like ice water. She'd spent her last dollars on the train ticket, sold her father's house and most of their possessions. There was no going back. "You have somewhere to stay?" the station master asked, concern etching his weathered face. Nora shook her head, fighting tears. "I'll figure something out." "The boarding house might have a room," offered the deputy. "Thank you," she whispered, though she had no idea how she would pay for lodging. With trembling hands, she gathered her bag and stepped into the dusty main street of Quartzsite. The town was larger than she'd expected. A church spire rose above wooden buildings, and horses stood hitched outside a saloon. Wagons rumbled past, and somewhere a piano played a jaunty tune that mocked her despair. Nora forced herself to walk toward what appeared to be the town center, painfully aware of curious glances. Her chest tightened with each step. What had she done? How could she have been so foolish? "You look lost." The deep voice came from behind her. Nora turned to find a tall man leading a chestnut horse. His face was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the strong line of his jaw, tanned by the sun. His clothes were trail-worn but clean denim trousers, a faded blue shirt and a leather vest. A gun hung at his hip. "I'm looking for Vincent Yates," she said, a final, desperate hope. The man's expression changed, something flickering in his hazel eyes. "What business do you have with Yates?" "I'm to marry him." Her voice caught. "But I've just been told his ranch doesn't exist." The man studied her for a long moment, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the distress she couldn't hide. Then, to her surprise, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair and features that were handsome despite a thin scar along his left temple. "My name is Vaughn Young," he said, "and I believe I might be able to help you understand what's happened. You know Vincent Yates, in a manner of speaking." Vaughn glanced around the busy street. "This isn't the place to discuss it. If you'll allow me, I can take you somewhere we can talk privately." Nora hesitated. Her mother's warnings about strange men echoed in her mind, but something about Vaughn's direct gaze inspired trust. "I don't have many options, Mr. Young." "No, it seems you don't." He offered a slight smile. "My horse can carry us both to my cabin. It's not far." Against her better judgment, Nora nodded. Vaughn helped her mount the horse before swinging up behind her. She sat stiffly, uncomfortable with the impropriety and the stranger's proximity. "Hold on," he advised, spurring the horse forward. They rode in silence for nearly 20 minutes, leaving the town behind and following a winding trail through scrubby desert vegetation. Finally, they crested a small hill, and Nora saw a modest cabin nestled against a rock face. A corral held several horses, and a small garden plot showed signs of careful tending. It wasn't the cattle ranch she'd envisioned, but it was far from the empty lot the deputy had described. Once inside the cabin, Vaughn offered her water from a ceramic pitcher. The interior was spare but clean: a wooden table with 2 chairs, a cast iron stove, shelves lined with books, and a curtained-off area she presumed contained a bed. "You're wondering why I've brought you here," Vaughn said, leaning against the table. "Among other things," Nora replied. "The truth is, there is no Vincent Yates." Nora gripped her water cup tighter. "What do you mean?" "I mean Vincent Yates is a name I used while working as a U.S. marshal. I was investigating a land fraud scheme." He hesitated. "Did you send money to this man?" $10 for the marriage license," Nora admitted, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. Vaughn nodded grimly. "You're not the first. There's a man named Theodore Blackwell who's been running this scheme across several territories. He poses as a prosperous rancher, convinces women to come west, and disappears with their money." "But I received letters for months," Nora protested. "Detailed letters about a life here." "Blackwell is thorough. He stole documents from my saddlebag during an altercation last year, including papers with the Yates alias. He's been using my former identity." Nora set down her cup, anger replacing shock. "So I've traveled nearly 2,000 miles to marry a man who doesn't exist, based on lies written by a criminal. I'm afraid so. And you're a marshal hunting this man." Vaughn looked away. "Was a marshal. I was shot during that same altercation. By the time I recovered, Blackwell had disappeared, and the agency had written him off as not worth the resources. I resigned my position and settled here to track him on my own." "Why?" "Because he killed my partner." Vaughn's voice hardened. "And because I can't abide men who prey on the vulnerable." Nora absorbed this information, her mind racing through the limited options before her. "What am I to do now, Mr. Young? I have nowhere to go, no money to return east, and apparently no fiancé. You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out your next steps. The town needs a school teacher perhaps that could provide you with income." "I taught children in Pennsylvania," Nora said, surprised by his insight. "Your letters mentioned it." At her confused expression, he added, "Blackwell kept your correspondence in my old saddlebag. I recovered it when I tracked him to Santa Fe last month. You've read my private letters, only enough to understand who his victims were." A trace of color appeared on his cheekbones. "I apologize for the invasion of privacy." Nora wanted to be angry, but exhaustion won out. "I suppose that's the least of my concerns right now." "There's food," Vaughn said, moving toward the stove. "You must be hungry after your journey." As he prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Nora observed him covertly. Despite his roughened exterior, there was a gentleness to his movements. He was nothing like the prosperous cattle rancher she'd imagined marrying, yet something about his straightforward manner appealed to her. "Mr. Young," she said as they ate, "why did you approach me in town? You could have ignored my situation." Vaughn considered her question. "I've been watching for Blackwell's victims. When I heard you asking about Vincent Yates, I knew you'd been deceived. But why help me?" "Because I feel responsible." His eyes met hers directly. "He's using my alias, and because no one should be left stranded in a strange place without recourse." After dinner, Vaughn insisted she take the bed behind the curtain while he slept on a bedroll near the stove. Nora was too exhausted to argue. As she lay in the darkness, the reality of her situation pressed down on her. She had no husband, no home, and no clear future. Yet strangely, she felt less afraid than she had on the train. There was something reassuring about Vaughn Young, a steadiness that suggested he wouldn't abandon her to fate. With that thought providing small comfort, she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the cabin's small window. Nora woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of movement. She smoothed her rumpled dress as best she could and emerged from behind the curtain to find Vaughn at the stove. "Good morning," he said, pouring coffee into a tin cup. "I hope you slept well." "As well as could be expected," she replied, accepting the cup gratefully. "I need to ride into town for supplies. You're welcome to accompany me." Nora nodded, suddenly struck by the strangeness of her circumstances. 24 hours ago, she'd been a mail-order bride full of nervous anticipation. Now she was alone with a former marshal in a cabin miles from town. "Mr. Young," she began hesitantly, "I appreciate your hospitality, but I can't impose on you indefinitely." "Is there truly work for a schoolteacher in Quartzsite? The previous teacher left 2 months ago. The town council has been searching for a replacement." He poured himself coffee. "It doesn't pay much, but it would provide you with a room at the schoolhouse and enough for basic necessities." "Then that's what I'll do." Nora straightened her shoulders, determined to make the best of her situation. "I've always believed education is the foundation of a civilized society." Something like approval flickered in Vaughn's eyes. "I'd say that's a good philosophy for the Arizona Territory. It could use more civilization." After a breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with molasses, they rode toward town. This time, Nora was more aware of the landscape, the distant purple mountains, the surprising variety of desert plants, the intense blue of the sky that seemed to stretch forever. "It's beautiful in a harsh way," she commented. "Most beautiful things have an edge of harshness," Vaughn replied. "Makes the beauty more meaningful." In town, Vaughn introduced her to Mayor Wilford, a portly man with an impressive mustache who seemed delighted at the prospect of a new schoolteacher. "Providence has smiled upon us," he declared, pumping Nora's hand enthusiastically. "Our children have been running wild for months." "Can you start Monday next?" "I would be happy to," Nora replied, relieved at how easily this part of her plan was falling into place. "But I'll need accommodations until then." "The schoolhouse has living quarters attached," the mayor explained. "Basic, but comfortable enough. We can have it ready by tomorrow." "Until then, Miss Mitchell is my guest," Vaughn said. his tone leaving no room for the speculation Nora saw forming in the mayor's eyes. After finalizing the arrangements and purchasing supplies, they visited the general store where Vaughn insisted on buying Nora necessary items: a hairbrush, soap, and writing materials. "You can repay me when you receive your first wages," he said when she protested. As they prepared to leave town, a commotion erupted outside the saloon. A crowd gathered around two men, one young and obviously drunk, the other older with a sheriff's badge. "What's happening?" Nora asked a nearby woman. "That fool Riley Thompson is causing trouble again," the woman replied with a sniff. "Claims someone cheated him at cards." The young man lurched forward, hand moving toward his holster. Before he could draw, Vaughn stepped between him and the sheriff. "That's enough, Riley," he said calmly. "Go sleep it off." "Mind your business, Young," Riley slurred. "This is between me and the law." "Sheriff Daniels is the law," Vaughn replied evenly, "and he's got enough to deal with without adding your foolishness." For a tense moment, Riley seemed ready to fight. Then, perhaps noticing the dangerous stillness in Vaughn's stance, he spat on the ground and stalked away. "Much obliged, Young," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Been a while since we've seen you in town. Just restocking supplies." Vaughn's eyes followed Riley's retreating figure. "Keep an eye on him. He's getting bolder." As they rode back to the cabin, Nora studied Vaughn's profile. "The sheriff seemed to respect your opinion. We've had dealings in the past, nothing significant. You handled that young man well, without violence." Vaughn's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "Violence should always be the last resort, Miss Mitchell, despite what dime novels might suggest about the West." "Please call me Nora," she said impulsively. "After all, I'm sleeping in your bed and wearing clothes you purchased." Formality seems rather pointless. His smile widened, transforming his face. "Nora, then, and I'm Vaughn." That evening, as they prepared another simple meal together, Nora found herself sharing stories of her life in Pennsylvania, her father's general store, her mother's death from influenza 10 years earlier, her dreams of someday seeing more of the world than her small town. "And now you have," Vaughn observed, "though perhaps not in the way you imagined." "No," Nora agreed, "but I've always believed life rarely follows the paths we lay out for it." A philosophical view for someone who's just had her future upended. Nora shrugged. "Being distraught won't change my circumstances. I prefer to look forward rather than back." "A rare quality," Vaughn said, studying her with new interest. After dinner, he pulled a worn book from a shelf. "Do you enjoy reading?" "Very much," Nora replied, eyeing the volume eagerly. "Emerson's Essays," he explained, handing her the book. "Not exactly light reading, but thought-provoking." "You surprise me, Mr. Y. Vaughn," she corrected herself. "I wouldn't have expected a former marshal to be interested in transcendentalist philosophy." "There were many long nights on the trail," he said with a shrug. "Books were my companions." As darkness fell, they sat in companionable silence, Nora reading Emerson, Vaughn cleaning his revolver with practiced movements. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, bringing a flush to her cheeks. This was what she'd imagined with her fictional fiancé: quiet evenings, shared tasks, the gradual building of a life together. Except Vaughn Young wasn't her fiancé, and tomorrow she would move to the schoolhouse to begin her new life alone. The next morning, Vaughn helped Nora settle into the small, attached living quarters behind the schoolhouse. The room was sparse: a narrow bed, a table with one chair, a small stove, and a washstand, but it was clean and private. "It's more than adequate," she told the mayor's wife, who had come to show her around. "Thank you for preparing it so quickly." "We're just pleased to have a teacher again," the woman replied. "The children need proper learning. Too many of them can barely write their names." After Mrs. Wilford left, Vaughn lingered in the doorway. "Will you be comfortable here?" "Yes," Nora assured him, though the room felt barren compared to the warmth of his cabin. "And I'll be busy preparing lessons. The children arrive on Monday." Vaughn nodded, seeming reluctant to leave. "If you need anything, send word to my cabin. I ride into town every few days for supplies." "You've already done more than enough," Nora said softly. "I can't thank you adequately. No thanks necessary." He shifted his weight, uncharacteristically awkward. "Good luck with your students." After he left, Nora sat on the edge of the bed, a strange emptiness filling her chest. For 2 days she'd had a purpose and companionship. Now she was alone again, with the weekend stretching before her. She squared her shoulders. This was what she'd wanted: independence, a fresh start. On Monday, she would have 20 children to teach. There was curriculum to plan, supplies to organize, and a classroom to arrange. The next 2 days passed in a flurry of activity. Nora met several townspeople who dropped by to welcome her, including the minister's wife, who invited her to Sunday services, and the shopkeeper's daughter, who offered to help clean the schoolroom. By Sunday evening, Nora had transformed the dusty classroom into a welcoming space with freshly scrubbed desks arranged in neat rows, a polished blackboard, and wildflowers in a jar on her desk. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. Nora dressed carefully in her blue dress, now cleaned and pressed, and pinned her hair in a simple but neat style. As the children began to arrive, some eager, others suspicious, a few clearly unwilling, she greeted each one with a smile and firm handshake. "Good morning," she said once they were seated. "I am Miss Mitchell, and I will be your teacher. We have much to learn together." The day passed quickly. Nora assessed their varied abilities, separated them into appropriate groups, and began the challenging task of engaging children ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. By afternoon, she had earned the respect of most through her firm but fair approach, though a few of the older boys remained deliberately uncooperative. As the children filed out at day's end, Sheriff Daniels appeared in the doorway. "Miss Mitchell," he said, tipping his hat. "Thought I'd check how your first day went." "Very well, thank you," she replied, erasing the blackboard. "The children are bright, if somewhat undisciplined." "That's putting it mildly," he chuckled. "Young Tim Radley tried to put a snake in the last teacher's desk." "No snakes today, fortunately," Nora said with a smile, "though I suspect they're testing my limits. They'll settle down once they know you're here to stay." The sheriff hesitated. "Speaking of staying, I wanted to warn you about a situation." Nora set down the eraser. "What situation?" "There's talk that Theodore Blackwell has been seen in Jerome, about 100 miles north. If he's operating in Arizona again, he might return to this area." A chill ran through Nora. "The man who posed as Vincent Yates?" "The same." The sheriff's expression was grave. "Vaughn Young rode out this morning when he got word, said he'd be back in a few days." "I see." Nora tried to hide her concern. "Is it dangerous?" "His pursuit of this man, Blackwell's killed before," the sheriff answered honestly. "But Young can handle himself. Best tracker I've ever known, and steady with a gun when necessary." After the sheriff left, Nora sat at her desk, troubled by this news. She'd known Vaughn was hunting Blackwell, but somehow the reality of the danger hadn't fully registered. Now she found herself worrying about a man she'd known less than a week, a man who owed her nothing but had shown her kindness when she most needed it. The next few days passed in a routine of teaching, preparing lessons, and gradually getting to know the townspeople. Nora was invited to tea at the minister's home, asked to join the ladies' sewing circle, and even received a basket of fresh eggs from a grateful parent. Slowly, Quartzsite was becoming less strange, its inhabitants less foreign. But each night as she lay in her narrow bed, her thoughts turned to Vaughn. Had he found Blackwell? Was he safe? The questions circled endlessly, keeping sleep at bay. On Friday afternoon, as Nora was dismissing her class, a familiar figure appeared in the schoolyard. Vaughn dismounted his horse, looking trail-worn but uninjured. The relief that washed through her was so powerful it nearly made her dizzy. "Class dismissed," she told the children, her voice betraying more excitement than was proper. "Remember your reading assignments for Monday." The children scattered, many casting curious glances at Vaughn as they passed. When the last had gone, Nora crossed the schoolyard to where he stood, restraining herself from running. "You're back," she said, suddenly unsure of the appropriate greeting for a man who was neither friend nor stranger. "I am." His eyes moved over her face as if checking that she was well. "How are your students treating you?" "Better than expected. No snakes in my desk yet." She searched his expression. "The sheriff told me why you left. Did you find him?" "No." Disappointment edged his voice. "The trail went cold near Prescott. He's clever about covering his tracks." "I'm sorry. It's happened before." Vaughn glanced toward the schoolhouse. "I won't keep you from your work." "I've finished for the day," Nora said quickly. "Would you like some coffee? The stove should still be warm." A smile touched his lips. Coffee would be welcome. Inside the classroom, Nora busied herself with the coffee pot while Vaughn examined the room. "You've made changes," he observed. "It's brighter." "Clean windows help," Nora replied. "And the children's artwork." She indicated several crude but colorful drawings pinned to the wall. "They seem to have taken to you." "Most have," she agreed. "There are a few holdouts among the older boys. They think education is unnecessary for future cowboys and miners." "A common view out here," Vaughn said, accepting the cup she offered. "But short-sighted. The West is changing. Those who can't read or calculate will be left behind." They settled at her desk, the familiar comfort of their conversations at the cabin returning easily. "Tell me about your week," Vaughn said. "Have you adjusted to town life?" Nora described her days, the challenges with certain students, the kindness of townspeople, her ongoing battle with the ancient stove in her quarters that smoked terribly each morning. Vaughn listened attentively, asking questions that showed genuine interest. "And you?" she asked when she'd finished. "Besides tracking Blackwell, what occupied your week?" "Mostly that," he admitted. "Though I stopped in Wickenburg to visit an old friend who's recovering from a mining accident. He's the one who alerted me to Blackwell's presence in the territory." As they talked, the afternoon light shifted, casting long shadows across the classroom floor. Finally, Vaughn stood. "I should go. People will talk if I stay much longer." "Let them talk," Nora said impulsively. "I owe you no explanations." "Perhaps not," Vaughn replied, his voice gentle, "but your reputation matters here. A schoolteacher is held to certain standards." "Of course," she said, embarrassed by her outburst. "You're right." At the door, he paused. "I brought something for you." From his saddlebag, he produced a small package wrapped in brown paper. "For your lessons." Nora unwrapped it to find a beautifully illustrated book of maps. "This is wonderful," she breathed, running her fingers over the detailed renderings of continents and countries. "The children will be fascinated. I thought it might help them understand there's a world beyond Arizona." "Thank you, Vaughn. It's a perfect gift." For a moment, they stood close enough that Nora could see flecks of amber in his hazel eyes. Then he stepped back, settling his hat on his head. "Good evening, Miss Mitchell." "Good evening, Mr. Young." She watched from the doorway as he mounted his horse and rode away, wondering why his departure left such emptiness in its wake. The following weeks established a pattern. Nora taught during the week. attended church on Sundays, and gradually became part of the community. Vaughn rode into town every few days, sometimes stopping at the schoolhouse after classes, other times merely nodding to her from across the street. Each brief interaction left Nora both satisfied, and wanting more. A contradiction she tried not to examine too closely. October arrived with cooler temperatures and preparations for the harvest festival. Nora was asked to help organize children's games and found herself spending evenings planning activities with Mrs. Wilford and the other women on the committee. "You must bring a gentleman to the dance," Mrs. Wilford told her one evening as they painted signs. "A pretty young woman shouldn't attend alone." "I have no gentleman to bring," Nora replied, focusing on her lettering. "Nonsense. Several eligible men in town have shown interest. There's Dr. Simmons, for one. He's asked about you specifically." "Dr. Simmons is at least 50, Nora objected. "A respectable age," Mrs. Wilford sniffed, "and he's established with a fine house." "I'm not looking for a husband, Mrs. Wilford." "Every woman needs a husband," the older woman insisted. "Especially out here. Life is too hard alone." Nora thought of her journey to Quartzsite, of the man who never existed and the empty lot where a ranch should have been. "I've learned that a fictional husband is worse than no husband at all." Mrs. Wilford's expression softened. "Of course, dear, that was a terrible deception. But not all men are deceivers." Later, walking home in the gathering dusk, Nora reflected on the conversation. She hadn't come west seeking independence, quite the opposite, yet here she was, making her own way. The irony wasn't lost on her. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the man following until he was nearly upon her. A hand clamped over her mouth, dragging her into the narrow space between buildings. "Don't scream," a voice slurred in her ear. The smell of whiskey was overwhelming. Nora recognized her assailant, Riley Thompson, the young troublemaker Vaughn had confronted weeks ago. Fear shot through her, but anger followed immediately. She bit down hard on the hand covering her mouth. "Damn it," Riley jerked back, giving Nora room to stomp on his foot with all her strength. "Help," she shouted, pushing away from him. "Someone help." Riley lunged for her again, but a shadow appeared at the alley entrance, and suddenly Riley was sprawling in the dirt, blood streaming from his nose. "Touch her again and I'll kill you," Vaughn said, his voice deadly calm as he stood over the fallen man. "She ain't worth it, Young," Riley spat, scrambling backward. "Get out of my sight." Vaughn's hand rested on his holstered gun. "Now." Riley staggered to his feet and fled. Only then did Vaughn turn to Nora, concern replacing rage. "Are you hurt?" "No," she said, though she was trembling. "You arrived at the perfect moment. I saw him following you from the saloon." Vaughn's jaw tightened. "He's been trouble since he arrived in town last year. This isn't his first attempt to accost a woman. He should be arrested. Sheriff's out of town until tomorrow." Vaughn offered his arm. "Let me walk you home." Once inside her quarters, Nora sank onto a chair, the aftermath of fear making her limbs weak. Vaughn busied himself lighting the lamp and stoking the fire in her small stove. "Thank you," she said when she could trust her voice again. "It seems I'm constantly in your debt." "There's no debt between us." He remained standing, hat in hand. "I should go. Please don't." The words escaped before she could consider their implications. "I mean, I'm still shaken. Would you stay a while?" Vaughn hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." They sat in silence for a few moments, the ticking of Nora's small clock unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Why were you in town tonight?" Nora finally asked. "I thought you only came every few days." "I had information about Blackwell," Vaughn replied. "He was seen near Phoenix last week. Are you going after him again?" "Not immediately. The trail's too cold." His eyes met hers. "And I have reasons to stay close to Quartzsite for now." The implication hung between them, unacknowledged but unmistakable. "Mrs. Wilford says I need a husband," Nora said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "She thinks life here is too difficult for a woman alone." Vaughn's expression gave nothing away. "And what do you think?" "I think." Nora paused, gathering her courage. "I think I came here expecting one kind of life and found another entirely. I'm not sure what I want anymore." "That's understandable." His voice was gentle. "You've endured significant change." "So have you," she pointed out. "Leaving the Marshalls, settling here, my changes were by choice. Yours were forced upon you." "Perhaps." Nora smoothed her skirt, suddenly nervous. "But I'm beginning to think they were for the best." Vaughn studied her face in the lamplight. "Are you?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "If Vincent Yates had been real, I never would have met you." The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions. Vaughn set his hat on the table, his movements deliberate. "Nora," he began, then stopped. "I'm not good with words outside of necessity." "You don't need to be," she said. "I understand. Do you?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I've spent 5 years hunting men like Blackwell. I've seen the worst humanity has to offer. I didn't expect to find." He gestured vaguely. "This. Whatever this is between us." "Neither did I," Nora confessed. "But it's there nonetheless." Their eyes held for a long moment, the connection between them strengthening with each passing second. Then Vaughn stood abruptly. "It's late. People will talk if I stay longer." "Let them talk," Nora said again, but this time she smiled. "Though perhaps not tonight." At the door, Vaughn turned back. "Will you attend the Harvest Festival? I'm helping organize it," Nora replied. "I can hardly avoid it. Save a dance for me." The simple request sent warmth spreading through her chest. "I'll save several." The day of the Harvest Festival arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear, and sunny. Quartzside's Main Street had been transformed with decorations of corn stalks, pumpkins, and brightly colored bunting. Tables groaned under the weight of pies, cakes, and savory dishes contributed by every household. Children ran excited races while adults visited, sharing news and gossip. Nora wore her best dress, the blue one, now adorned with new lace collar and cuffs she'd purchased with her first month's wages. She'd loosened her hair from its usual severe style, allowing it to fall in soft waves pinned back with combs borrowed from the minister's wife. As she supervised children's games, she couldn't help scanning the crowd for Vaughn. They hadn't spoken since the night of her encounter with Riley, though she'd seen him from a distance twice. Each time, he'd tipped his hat to her, a gesture that somehow conveyed more than words could have. "You look lovely, Miss Mitchell," Dr. Simmons said, appearing at her side. The physician was indeed in his 50s, with gray hair and a meticulously trimmed beard. "The desert air agrees with you." "Thank you, doctor," Nora replied politely. "Are you enjoying the festivities?" "Very much, though they would be enhanced by your company at dinner." He smiled broadly. "Would you do me the honor?" Before Nora could respond, a familiar voice spoke from behind them. "I believe Miss Mitchell already has dinner plans." Vaughn stood there, looking different than Nora had ever seen him. He'd traded his usual trail clothes for a clean white shirt, dark vest, and trousers. His hair was neatly combed, and he'd shaved his usual stubble. "Young," Dr. Simmons acknowledged stiffly. "I wasn't aware that Miss Mitchell had made arrangements." "Perhaps I spoke out of turn," Vaughn said, his eyes meeting Nora's with a question in them. "Not at all, Mr. Young," she replied, unable to suppress her smile. "I was indeed saving dinner for our discussion." Dr. Simmons looked between them, his disappointment evident. "Another time, perhaps," he said before retreating with as much dignity as he could muster. When he was gone, Nora turned to Vaughn. "That was rather presumptuous of you." "It was," he agreed, "but effective." I didn't know you owned a clean shirt, she teased, taking in his transformed appearance. I save it for special occasions. And this qualifies. The most special in recent memory, he said seriously. As the sun began to set, lanterns were lit throughout the town square, casting a golden glow over the festivities. A makeshift dance floor had been created in front of the church, and several musicians tuned their instruments: a fiddle, a banjo, and an accordion. Vaughn and Nora shared dinner at one of the long tables, joined by other townspeople who cast curious glances their way. Nora was conscious of the speculation their companionship generated but found she didn't care. For the first time since arriving in Quartzsite, she felt truly content. When the music began, Vaughn stood and offered his hand. I believe you promised me a dance. I did, Nora agreed, allowing him to lead her to the dance floor. The musicians struck up a lively reel and couples formed sets for the dance. Nora hadn't danced in years, but the steps came back easily as Vaughn guided her through the patterns with surprising grace. You dance well for a former marshal, she said when they were briefly side by side. My mother insisted all her sons learn, he replied. Said it was essential for civilized men. A wise woman. She was. A shadow passed over his face. She would have liked you. As the evening progressed, they danced several more times, alternating between energetic group dances and slower waltzes that allowed them to converse. During one such dance, Vaughn's arm around her waist, Nora felt a happiness she hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. People are watching us, she murmured, noting the interested gazes of townspeople. Let them watch, Vaughn said, echoing her earlier sentiment. I'm not concerned with their opinions. What are you concerned with? His eyes met hers directly. Only yours. The music ended, and Vaughn led her away from the dance floor toward the edge of the festivities. The night had grown cooler, and he draped his coat over her shoulders without asking. Walk with me, he suggested, indicating the quieter street leading away from the square. They strolled in companionable silence for a while, the sounds of the festival fading behind them. Above, stars crowded the vast sky, more than Nora had ever seen in Pennsylvania. I never imagined the West would be so beautiful, she said, gazing upward. It is beautiful, Vaughn agreed. And harsh, and unforgiving, much like life itself. You're becoming philosophical again, Nora teased. You bring it out in me. He stopped walking, turning to face her. Nora, there's something I need to tell you. The seriousness in his voice made her heart quicken. What is it? I received word today. Blackwell has been spotted in Tucson. He's heading this way. You're going after him. It wasn't a question. I have to. His expression was troubled. But for the first time, I'm reluctant to leave. Because of me, because of us, he corrected. Whatever this is between us, it matters to me, more than I expected it to. Nora's heart seemed to swell in her chest. It matters to me too. I don't know when I'll return, Vaughn continued. Blackwell is cunning. The chase could take weeks. I understand, Nora said, though disappointment washed through her. You've been hunting him for years. You can't stop now. No, I can't. His hands found hers in the darkness. But I wanted you to know that I'll be thinking of you. That I'll come back as soon as I can. When do you leave? At first light. Nora nodded, fighting unexpected tears. Then we should make the most of tonight. They returned to the festival, dancing every dance until the musicians packed away their instruments. As Vaughn walked Nora home, the town was quiet except for crickets and the occasional distant coyote call. At her door, Vaughn hesitated. I'm not good at goodbyes. Then don't say goodbye, Nora suggested. Say you'll see me soon. I'll see you soon, he repeated softly. Then, with a gentleness that belied his strength, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. The kiss was brief, but conveyed everything words could not: tenderness, promise, regret at parting. When they separated, Nora saw her own emotions reflected in his eyes. "Be careful," she whispered. "Always am," he assured her. "Lock your door." She watched him walk away until darkness swallowed his form, then went inside, touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. The days following Vaughn's departure stretched endlessly. Nora threw herself into teaching, extending school hours to include additional lessons for interested students and starting a small library with books donated by townspeople. In the evenings, she wrote detailed letters to Vaughn, though she had no way to send them. 2 weeks passed with no word. Then 3. November brought colder weather and preparation for Thanksgiving festivities. Nora found herself included in every social gathering, her initial status as an outsider completely forgotten. Yet despite the community's warmth, she felt Vaughn's absence keenly. "You're pining, dear Mrs. Wilford observed one afternoon as they arranged donated food for less fortunate families. "It's not healthy." "I'm not pining," Nora objected. "I'm concerned. There's a difference." "Vaughn Young can take care of himself," the older woman said confidently. "He'll return when his business is concluded." "If he returns," Nora murmured. The possibility that Vaughn might not come back had begun to haunt her sleepless nights. On the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, as Nora was dismissing her students, Sheriff Daniels appeared in the schoolhouse doorway. His expression sent ice through her veins. "Sheriff," she asked when the last child had gone, "what is it?" "Got a telegram from the marshal's office in Tucson," he said, removing his hat. "There was a shooting. Vaughn was injured. The room seemed to tilt. How badly, don't know details. Just that he's recovering at the hospital there." "I have to go to him," Nora said immediately, gathering her things. "When does the next train leave?" The sheriff looked uncomfortable. "Miss Mitchell, it's not proper for an unmarried woman to—" "I don't care what's proper," she interrupted. "Vaughn needs someone with him, and I'm going." "At least let me arrange an escort," the sheriff suggested. "Mrs. Wilford might accompany you." "There's no time for that," Nora insisted. "Please, Sheriff, tell me when the train leaves." After extracting a promise that she would telegraph upon arrival, the sheriff reluctantly gave her the information. Nora rushed to her quarters, packed a small bag with essential items, and withdrew most of her savings from the tin box where she kept them. Within an hour, she was on the afternoon train to Tucson. The journey took 7 hours, and darkness had fallen by the time Nora arrived in Tucson. The city was larger than she'd expected, with brick buildings, proper streets, and gas lamps lighting the main thoroughfares. A kindly porter directed her to the hospital, a 2-story structure near the center of town. Inside, a stern-faced nurse initially refused to let her see Vaughn, citing visiting hours and family-only policies. "I am family," Nora lied desperately. "I'm his fiancé." The nurse's expression softened slightly. "He's been asking for a Nora. Is that you?" "Yes," Nora confirmed, relief washing over her. "Please, I've traveled all day." 5 minutes, the nurse conceded. "He needs rest." She led Nora to a small room at the end of a corridor. Inside, Vaughn lay still on a narrow bed, his face pale against white sheets. Bandages wrapped his left shoulder and chest, and a purple bruise marked his temple. "Vaughn," Nora whispered, moving to his side, his eyes opened slowly, focusing on her with evident disbelief. "Nora, am I dreaming?" "No," she took his hand, tears blurring her vision. "I'm here." "How?" "Sheriff Daniels received a telegram. I came immediately." She examined his injuries with concern. "What happened?" "Blackwell," Vaughn said, wincing as he shifted position. "I tracked him to a saloon outside Tucson. He had helped this time 2 men I didn't see coming." "You could have been killed," Nora said, unable to keep accusation from her voice. "Almost was," he admitted. "Bullet missed my heart by inches, and Blackwell, gone. Again." Frustration laced his words. "I was so close, Nora." The nurse appeared in the doorway. "Time's up. He needs to sleep." "I'll be back tomorrow," Nora promised, reluctant to let go of Vaughn's hand. "Where are you staying?" he asked, seeming more alert now. "I hadn't thought that far ahead," Nora confessed. "There's a decent hotel across from the station," the nurse offered unexpectedly. "Tell Mr. Barton I sent you. He'll give you a fair rate." Nora thanked her and bent to kiss Vaughn's forehead. "Rest. Heal. I'll return in the morning." The hotel was indeed respectable if simple. Nora slept fitfully, her mind filled with images of Vaughn bleeding, dying alone in a strange place. By dawn, she was dressed and ready to return to the hospital. She found Vaughn sitting up, color returned to his face. A doctor was examining his wound, rewrapping bandages with practiced efficiency. "Your fiancé is back," the doctor observed as Nora entered. "Good. You'll need help during your recovery." Vaughn's eyes met Nora's over the doctor's shoulder, a question in them. She gave an imperceptible nod. "When can I leave?" Vaughn asked. "Tomorrow if your fever doesn't return," the doctor replied. "But no travel for at least a week. That wound needs time to heal properly." After he left, Nora sat beside the bed. "Fiancé." It seemed the simplest explanation, Vaughn said, a hint of color touching his cheekbones. "Though I should be the one proposing, not a hospital nurse." "We can worry about proper proposals later," Nora said practically. "For now, we need to decide what to do. You heard the doctor, no travel for a week." "I've arranged rooms at a boarding house," Vaughn told her. "The owner is the widow of a former marshal. She's expecting us tomorrow." "Us? If you'll stay," he added quickly. "I know you have responsibilities in Quartzsite. School is closed for Thanksgiving week," Nora said. "I can stay until Sunday at least." Relief crossed his features. "Good." "That's good." The next day, Vaughn was released with strict instructions for rest and wound care. The boarding house proved to be a tidy residence on a quiet street with 2 adjacent rooms reserved for them. Mrs. Callahan, the owner, was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who clearly adored Vaughn. "Known this boy since he was a wet-behind-the-ears deputy," she told Nora as she showed them to their rooms. "Saved my Albert's life once. You got yourself a good man." "I know," Nora replied, finding she meant it completely. The next few days established a gentle routine. Nora helped Vaughn change his bandages, brought meals from the kitchen, and read to him from newspapers and books borrowed from Mrs. Callahan's collection. In the afternoons, when he napped, she explored Tucson, returning with small treasures, a packet of peppermint candies, a book of poetry, freshly baked bread from a bakery she discovered. On Thanksgiving Day, Mrs. Callahan invited them to join her family dinner. Seated around a table with strangers who treated them like old friends, Nora felt a contentment that transcended her circumstances. Under the table, Vaughn's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. That evening, as they sat on the boarding house porch watching the sunset paint the sky in spectacular colors, Vaughn broke a comfortable silence. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice thoughtful, "about Blackwell, about my pursuit of him." "What about it?" Nora asked, suddenly anxious. 5 years is a long time to chase vengeance," he said slowly. "Perhaps too long. You're considering stopping. I'm considering prioritizing differently." He turned to face her. "When I was lying in that hospital bed, thinking I might die, it wasn't Blackwell I regretted not catching. It was the life I hadn't lived, the future I might never have." Nora's heart quickened. "What future is that? One that includes you?" He took her hand, his expression earnest. "I don't have much to offer, Nora. A small cabin, land that barely supports a few horses, a past full of violence I'm trying to leave behind. But whatever I have is yours if you want it." Tears pricked Nora's eyes. Are you proposing Vaughn Young? Ineptly, it seems, he said with a soft laugh. But yes, I love you, Nora. I think I have since you stood in my cabin that first night, determined to make the best of impossible circumstances. I love you too, she whispered. And yes, I want that future cabin, horses, reformed marshal, and all. His kiss was gentle but filled with promise, sealing their commitment as the last light faded from the sky. Sunday arrived too soon. Though Vaughn insisted he was well enough to travel, Nora could see the journey taxed his strength. They reached Quartzsite in the evening, greeted by a small crowd of well-wishers who had somehow learned of their return. Word travels fast, Vaughn observed as they made their way through enthusiastic greetings. Small towns thrive on gossip, Nora replied. Especially romantic gossip. Sheriff Daniels approached, shaking Vaughn's hand carefully. Glad to see you in one piece, Young. Mostly in one piece, Vaughn corrected with a grimace. Got news you'll want to hear, the sheriff continued. Theodore Blackwell was caught in Yuma yesterday. Tried to pull the same scheme with the wrong woman. Turned out she was the sister of a man he'd swindled in Texas. She recognized him immediately. Stunned silence followed this announcement. Then Vaughn began to laugh, a full, rich sound Nora had never heard from him before. 5 years, he said when he could speak again. 5 years hunting him, and he's caught because he picked the wrong woman to deceive. Seems fitting, Nora said, squeezing his arm. Another mail-order bride scheme gone wrong. Justice has a sense of humor, Vaughn agreed. Then to the sheriff. Will they need me to testify, eventually? They're holding him on multiple charges. Trial won't be for months. As they walked toward Nora's quarters at the schoolhouse, she could almost see the weight lifting from Vaughn's shoulders. How does it feel? She asked. To know he's caught, strange, Vaughn admitted. Like closing a book I've been reading for too long. I'm ready for a new story now. At her door, he kissed her goodnight with a tenderness that still made her heart race. I'll come for you tomorrow after school, he promised. There's something I want to show you. The next day dragged endlessly. Nora's students were full of questions about her absence and Vaughn's injury, forcing her to craft a carefully edited version of events. When the final bell rang, she found Vaughn waiting outside with his horse and a borrowed wagon. Where are we going? She asked as he helped her up to the seat. You'll see, was his only response. They traveled west out of town, following the same path Nora had taken that first day when Vaughn brought her to his cabin. But instead of turning toward his property, they continued further, eventually stopping at a rise overlooking a small valley. Below, a clear creek wound through grassy land dotted with cottonwood trees. It's beautiful, Nora said, taking in the unexpected greenery amid the desert landscape. It's ours, Vaughn replied. If you want it. Ours. I bought it last month, he explained, before leaving to track Blackwell. The water rights alone are worth more than I paid. Good grazing land, fertile soil for growing. You bought land without telling me. Nora wasn't sure whether to be amused or annoyed. I bought possibilities, Vaughn corrected. A place where we could build something together. A home. A school eventually when the valley has more families. Nora gazed at the valley, picturing it as Vaughn described, a house among the trees, children playing by the creek, a future built with purpose and love. When I came west, she said softly, I was looking for security. A husband who would provide for me, a safe harbor. And instead you found an empty lot, Vaughn finished. And you, Nora corrected, turning to face him. I found you instead. The December wedding was small but joyous, held in the church with most of Quartzsite in attendance. Nora wore a new dress of cream-colored silk ordered specially from Phoenix, with Mrs. Wilford's lace veil crowning her hair. Vaughn, still moving carefully but healing well, stood tall in a new suit, his eyes never leaving Nora's face as they spoke their vows. The reception lasted well into the evening, with dancing, feasting, and so many well wishes that Nora's cheeks ached from smiling. As darkness fell, they slipped away to begin their journey to the valley that would become their home. For their first night as husband and wife, Vaughn had prepared a surprise. In a sheltered spot near the creek, he'd constructed a temporary shelter canvas stretched over a wooden frame, furnished with a proper bed, a small table, and a stove that radiated welcome heat against the winter chill. "It's perfect," Nora whispered as she stepped inside, seeing the care he'd taken to make their first home comfortable despite its impermanence. "Not perfect," Vaughn demurred, lighting a lantern that cast a golden glow over the space. "But it's a beginning." Later, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Nora rested her head on Vaughn's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You ever think about how strangely fate works?" she mused. "If Vincent Yates had been real, if Blackwell hadn't stolen your identity." "We would never have met," Vaughn finished. "I've thought about it often. It makes me almost grateful to Blackwell," Nora admitted, "though I'd never tell him so." Vaughn's laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Nor should you. His ego is large enough. What will happen to him?" "Prison, most likely, for a very long time." Vaughn's hand stroked her hair gently. "But I don't want to think about him tonight, or ever again if possible." "What do you want to think about?" Nora asked, raising herself on one elbow to see his face in the faint moonlight filtering through the canvas. "Our future," Vaughn replied simply. "The house we'll build come spring, the garden you'll plant, the children we might have someday." "Children," Nora smiled. "You've thought that far ahead." "I've thought about every possibility," he admitted. "Every day of our lives together." "Tell me," she urged, settling back against him. "Tell me about these possibilities." As the creek murmured outside and stars wheeled overhead, Vaughn described the life they would build, detailed, practical dreams anchored in the reality of their circumstances, but expansive enough to encompass all their hopes. Nora added her own visions, their futures entwining as naturally as their bodies had. When Vaughn finally fell silent, Nora kissed him softly. "It sounds wonderful," she whispered. "All of it." "It will be," he assured her, "because we'll create it together." Spring arrived with explosive greenery in their valley. Construction on their permanent home began as soon as the ground thawed, with neighbors traveling from quartzsite to help raise the frame and walls. By May, the two-story house stood complete, 6 rooms with wide windows to catch the breeze, a deep porch wrapping around 3 sides, and a kitchen large enough for Nora's growing collection of cooking equipment. The school board had reluctantly accepted Nora's resignation, though she continued teaching until her replacement arrived in June. Their wedding gift to her was a collection of books for the school she planned to open in the valley once more families settled there. Vaughn, fully recovered from his wound, divided his time between improving their property and occasional work as a scout for the cavalry at nearby Fort Whipple. The regular income supplemented what they earned from the small herd of horses Vaughn was carefully breeding. On a warm evening in late June, they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the valley in gold and crimson. Nora's hands rested on her stomach, still flat, but containing a secret they'd confirmed with the doctor the previous week. "We should write your sister," Vaughn suggested, following her thoughts as he often did. "Invite her to visit when the baby comes." "She'd like that," Nora agreed, "though she may never leave once she sees how beautiful it is here." "She's welcome to stay," Vaughn said generously. "This valley has room for more Mitchells." "And more Youngs," Nora added with a smile. "Speaking of which, we should decide on names soon." "I thought we had months yet," Vaughn protested mildly. "We do, but I like planning ahead." Nora leaned against his shoulder, contentment washing through her. "Did I ever tell you what I thought when I first saw Quartzsite? From the train. What? I thought it looked harsh and unforgiving. I couldn't imagine finding happiness in such a place." Vaughn's arm tightened around her. "And now? Now I can't imagine being happy anywhere else," Nora replied truthfully. "This land, this life we're building, it's everything I never knew I wanted." "Not exactly what you signed up for when you answered that advertisement," Vaughn observed. "No," Nora agreed, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. "It's infinitely better." As night fell fully over their valley, bringing the symphony of crickets and the distant howl of coyotes, Nora thought of the journey that had brought her here, the deception, the empty lot, the cowboy who had found her instead. Every twist of fate, every hardship and surprise had led to this moment of perfect belonging. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, whatever joys or sorrows awaited in their future, she knew with absolute certainty that they would face them together, two people who had found each other against all odds, creating a home and a life that neither could have imagined alone. And that, Nora reflected as Vaughn's hand entwined with hers, was the greatest adventure of all.